Welcome back to We Are Wool People. My name is Ailsa, and on this channel we talk about knitting. So how are you all? Lovely to see you, and thank you for joining me again today. Been a little while since you've heard from me. A couple of things have happened around here. We did actually go to Queensland for a week and found somewhere to live, and we're driving back again tomorrow for a couple of days. I have had plenty of knitting time, and although I do feel like I have been knitting a lot of hours, I'm not sure how my progress is going to fare up. I've got one finished object today, I've got 3 whips, I've got a what am I wearing section, I've got some acquisitions, and I also at the very end I might just talk a little bit about the books that I've been reading and the TV that I've been watching. I'll give you a chance to nick off if you're not interested in it. And I do watch the end of other podcasters who add a little bit of that into their content. It's because, you know, we're whole people, aren't we? We do more than one thing. I don't just knit. I knit and I cook and I read and I watch TV while I'm knitting, and I do lots of other things. I go to work and I live my life and socialise with friends. I've got a life that's got more than one thing in it, although it's pretty knitting biased, I must say. Anyway, what am I wearing? Let's start with that. I'm wearing what was my finished object from last episode. It's my basic Boatneck tank by Madison McCall. She is True Summer Knits on YouTube, and this is her first pattern release. I mentioned it last month. You can actually get this pattern for free, and because it's a pay what you want model of pattern release. I paid for mine because I wanted to. Knitted, as I mentioned, in 100% cashmere yarn, so they say, that I bought from Temu. I've gotten a lot of wear out of this top in the last couple of weeks because it's been, it's transitioning into summer, it's spring here, but because of the actual softness of this, even though it is cashmere, it's absolutely, completely, you can't feel it at all next to skin, and I've found that I've been wearing it a real lot. It's got a real fashion forward kind of way about it too, because there's a lot of knitted tops out there in the shops, and so this one was a really good choice to make, for me anyway. The other thing I really like about it, the couple of features that I think are really, really great about it, first of all, is the height of the underarm. It's really high, so even though it is just a little tank, it's really bra friendly, and it's actually quite demure, if you like, and it's good. I like it. I've been wearing it a real lot. I'm wearing it today with a pair of really loose linen drawstring pants that I wear a lot of, and I'm really enjoying this top. That's what I'm wearing today. Next up is my first finished object. My first finished object today is the Alma cardigan. So I'm going to show it to you inside out because everybody wants to see the inside of a colourwork project, don't they? So let's look at the inside first. Here is my Alma cardigan inside out, all off the blocking boards and completely finished, including the steek, which I'll show you in a minute. I didn't do any float catching, although there aren't very many long floats in this project. The only long floats is this last one here, which I probably should have caught, but I didn't. And there's another one of those long ones down here somewhere, about there. So they're the longest floats that we have. That is my Alma cardigan inside at the front, at the back, and here's my Alma cardigan inside from the front. Fold it over. Just fold it over a little bit so you can see. Now let's talk about the steek. This yarn is, I keep saying it's superwash yarn, but my understanding is that the term superwash is a trademarked term, and therefore what Bendigo Woolen Mills say that their yarn is machine washable. I don't think it actually has been treated with the trademark superwash treatment. This yarn is Bendigo Woolen Mill 8-ply luxury, and the contrast yarn is Bendigo Woolen Mill Prism in the colour Mystic. I've mentioned that a few times now. I was inspired by the Louie and Lola kits that are made out of the beautiful possum merino blend. This cardigan had a steek down the middle, so what did I do? I ran 2 lines of sewing on the machine on either side of the stitch, either side of the steek, so there were 2 lines down this side and 2 lines down this side, and then I covered the cut, and then I cut it down the centre, and then I covered the cut stitches with this grosgrain ribbon that I hand sewed in. It came out quite well. It certainly gives the button band a real structure. There's no stretch obviously in that because of the grosgrain ribbon, but I think that's quite good for a cardigan. It's not going to grow in length. It's going to stay exactly where it is. Let me show you up close what this looks like. You can see that the cardigan itself, this is the front side of the cardigan in the button band that's done in a mosaic rib, and then that is the grosgrain ribbon, and it does sit flat back against the inside of the cardigan, so it sits like a facing on the inside of a jacket, and it's very tidy, and it came out quite well. I'm really happy with it. I will try it on for you. Let me tell you, when I knitted this cardigan, the sleeves were a perfect length, and then after they were blocked, the sleeve length just absolutely grew so much in this yarn. It was crazy. And the sleeves grew a lot more than the actual body length grew. Let's have a look. Here it is. There you go. I wanted to film today's episode outside because I've got a beautiful jacaranda tree that is really close to the house. Oh, pardon me. Really close to the house on the patio, is on the deck, but I was worried about the cross breeze, and plus we've just had a thunderstorm, so it's pretty dark and dingy out there, and I was worried about the cross breeze making a real bad noise. This cardigan was a great knit. The designer is Susanna Cardigan. The cast off along the button band on this cardigan has been now done 3 times, 1, 2, 3. First time I did it, I cast off using the Italian sewn bind off method that was recommended in the pattern, and that just rolled 100% straight in. It rolled so much. The second method I used was just an ordinary, knit one past the previous stitch over, just a very, very ordinary everyday cast off, which I did with the wrong side facing, because I figured that if it was going to roll forward, if I did it with the wrong side facing, that it would roll the other way. That wasn't very successful, but mostly the reason why I had to rip that out as well, it was that as I went through, I realised that I'd actually dropped a couple of these little stitches and missed some on the way through, so I couldn't leave that. I had live stitches on my button band, so I had to rip that back, and then I cast it off again. It's still rolling, but I did notice in the pattern that a lot of the projects on Ravelry do roll slightly. Mine roll a little bit more than that, but more than slightly, but they all do roll slightly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it back again. I'm going to actually do a couple of rows of garter stitch and then cast off again, and then when it does roll back, it will roll onto the garter stitch and leave the button band itself the proper width. Yeah, I probably won't bring it back as a second finished object. I'm going to consider this one done and dusted in my 2024 finished knits. The total cost of this project was about $44, so it was such a bargain. The 2 skeins of luxury were about $16 each, and I think that the Bendigo Wool and Mill Prism in the colour Mystic was much the same. So that's the Alma cardigan finished in time for the knit along, which I was a mostly silent participant because I've been really busy, but I was chipping away at that. So there is my finished object, the Alma cardigan by Susanna Cardigan. The next thing I'm going to talk about is my whip. I liked this basic Boatneck tank, and so I cast on another one. And I hadn't even cast this on in my last episodes. I guess I have made quite a bit of progress on it. Here it is. I've knitted down and split for the sleeves. I've got a couple of centimetres to go. I didn't put any of the waist shaping in this one, but I am going to put the waist shaping in on this one. And I knitted one size bigger than this one too, because I wanted it to have more of a relaxed fit. This is the beautiful yarn that I've never used before, Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino in the colour Soft Mint. So her colours are very well named. They are exactly what you would imagine. It's a very soft mint. It's a light colour and it's really nice. This yarn's recommended needle size is a 3mm needle and the gauge recommended is 28 stitches. I am using a 2.5mm needle and I'm getting 27.5 stitches gauge. My row gauge is 41 rows and the pattern recommended gauge is 48 rows. That's a lot of difference. I don't know how I would ever get a 48 row gauge on this. I don't know what it has to do with, but my row gauge is not there. But my stitch gauge is very, very close. I'm about to do a bit of surgery on this, and when I do it, I'll probably video it and show it to you. So where I'd finished one of the balls of yarn and I worked in a new ball of yarn, I did something that I had seen recommended where you knit one stitch from the old ball, one stitch from the new ball, one stitch from the old ball, one stitch from the new ball, blah, 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 blah. And I don't like how that's come out. I think you can see it. And because I row out a little bit on these really fine yarns to start with, that I don't really like it. It's here, you can see, oh wait a minute, can you see? I don't know if you, it's here, across there. And I think you can really see it and I'm not happy with it. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put it on a blocking mat, and between there and there I'm going to unpick all of that and then come back and just knit that all down using a single strand. You can see at the back where it's what it looks like. This is my whip number one, another basic Boatneck tank in Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino. This is actually the recommended yarn for this pattern. Number two. Do you remember I said when I was talking about, a couple of months ago, I was talking about you know, like your opus knitting, your really big project, your big lifelong dream of a project. And I was talking about making a dress, and the dress I was talking about was the Tove dress, which is actually a crocheted dress. Well, I bought some yarn for that, and I thought that I was going to be, you know, that I'd really cracked it. This is the yarn that I bought. It's Cartier Brisas. It's a 100% mercerized cotton yarn. And it's very shiny. And it's a really pretty yarn. I actually thought that it would be shinier than it was. I thought that when I crocheted up that it would make something that was really quite evening in style. But unfortunately, now that it's actually been crocheted up, it does sit a little bit flat. But it's still nice, and I am still going to finish making a top. I probably won't go right down to make a dress in it. Let me show you how this is going. Here it is. It's quite effective, isn't it, this stitch pattern? I'll just pop it on. Not much to see really, but I'll pop it on anyway. You can see it's actually going to be quite effective, I think. It's and quite striking a top. It's crocheted and I'm almost ready. I think I've got four or so rows to go before I split at the underarms and then go all the way down, and I think it's going to be quite a good top. This pattern is called the Tove dress, and I bought it on Etsy. There's 30 pages in the pattern, very detailed. But it's quite clear and easy to understand, and the advice that is given is quite conversational and it's interesting. You can see on the inside that every second row is actually crocheted rather in a different colour, and it's crocheted into the back post, so you can hardly see it from the front, and that's deliberate. It's crocheted into the back post, and then when you use your main colour to do your front, you know, like your facing row, you're actually crocheting into that back post contrast colour row from before, not crocheting into the main colour, and so you're never putting any pressure on your previous main colour row, your previous front side row. And so in terms of stretch, vertical stretch, you won't, this dress will retain its structure because of that. So every second row is actually a structural row. It's really clever. So this is the Tove dress, which I'm going to finish as a top in, and that is whip number 2. Whip number 3. This is a Musselburgh hat, another one. I've knitted 3 of these this year. This one is for my husband for Christmas, and I'm knitting it in leftover Bendigo woolen mill alpaca that I used to make my slip over earlier in the year, my Montpellier vest earlier in the year. There isn't much to say about this pattern. It's a stockinette hat. It's clever. You can make it with any yarn, any gauge, and mine, I've noticed only in the last couple of nights, is probably a bit big. That's right, only a hat. It'll be a big warm hat. So that's my Musselburgh hat. So that's my mindless knitting project. Some people have socks, I have Musselburgh hats. I want to knit the petite knit Oslo hat as well, and I've got some yarn for that back there, but that'll be my next mindless project when this one's finished. Now, as for my whip number 3, I've left the best till last. Finally, having now finished my Alma cardigan, I am very pleased to tell you that Priscilla has come back to life, and here she is. I started right again from the beginning because I feel like I never gave it the love or the attention that it really deserved. Now, of course, it's unblocked, and of course you all know that, so it all looks a bit scrunched up. But I'll bring it up and I'll show you. There's the first front of the Priscilla cardigan with this really, really lovely lace panel here. Then there's a cable panel. There's this really, really nice bobble panel, and then the cable panel again comes in, graduates in slowly as the front is increased here. So the top will come along, is increasing down the centre because it's a cardigan, and the cable pattern is gradually increased as the number of stitches increases down the V-neck of the cardigan. Exactly the same thing for the other side. You can see the patterns coming, the cable pattern is graduated down, then I've got the bobble pattern, and then this beautiful lace pattern, and then the cable pattern down again. It's lovely knit. Marzena deliberately knits the back of the cardigan wider than the front of the cardigan because she believes that gives a better fit. When I finish it, I'll tell you whether I think I concur or not. There we go at the back. I'm really enjoying this lace knitting. It's now that I've got the time to spend on it and got the energy to focus on it, it really is a beautiful knit. It reminds me how much I really, really love knitting lace. I'm using this as the cable needle. Now I will use just a DPN, a short DPN, or I will cable without a cable needle. But I have found that this little twirly cable needle is actually faster than both of those methods. It's really, really great to scoop up your little needles in here, slide it on, put this at the front or the back, and then slide it back on, put it in your mouth when you're finished like everybody, and then it works really well. I'm really happy with it. This pattern is meticulously engineered, and it's been written with a lot of attention to detail. There are a couple of pattern nuances, I guess, that I have found a little bit annoying, but there's no doubt that this pattern is beautifully engineered, beautifully designed. So I will wait till I get to the end to tell you what those minor annoyances are. They mostly related to pattern wording and the flow of the knitting But what I've found now that I've finished the shaping for the V-neck, that I have done this. I've gotten my charts. This is very rudimentary, by the way. I've gotten my charts and I've just cut them out and sticky tape them onto this piece of paper. So all I have to do is just put this piece of paper there, and I know that when I'm knitting through, the first section is the cable section, and then there's a lace section, and then there's a bobble section, then another cable, then a lace, then a cable, lace, and then so on, all the way around the cardigan. Down the bottom, she actually gives you the placement of each chart. The bobble chart is 12 rows long and the lace chart is 24 rows long. If it was me designing that pattern, I would have done both charts 24 rows long so that you could stick them next to each other. So that's my 3 whips. When I was in Queensland last week, I visited 2 yarn stores, and one of them was Say Little Hen in Noosaville, and the other one was Studio Yarn in Cooran. Both of them had a completely different vibe, but they were both lovely yarn stores. And I picked up a bit of yarn from both of those shops. Actually, I didn't get any yarn from Studio Yarn, but I did buy something from there. I'll show you in a second. And so here is my yarn tourism segment, and I've also got another acquisition, just a little one. I will show you what I got first from Say Little Hen in Noosaville. I bought several skeins of a pure silk fingering yarn in a natural beige colour. There it is in the skein. It's BC Yarn Soft Silk. It's barrette silk, so it is the humane silk that gets produced without killing any silkworms. It's easily double the thickness of the Knitting for Olive pure silk, which is also a barrette silk made cruelty free. Show them to you next to each other. On the left is the Knitting for Olive silk, and on the right is the BC Yarn Soft Silk. Actually, it's difficult to see, I think, on the screen, but the BC Yarn Silk is quite thicker. It's pretty fluffy, and it's got a very soft, worn-in, dry hand. I am going to make with this the Milady's dress, a pattern which, by the way, was more than $30. That's crazy price for a knitting pattern, isn't it? How expensive? That's very expensive. And I noticed it's got a lot of pages too. And effectively what the Milady's dress knitting pattern looks like to me is it actually looks like it's a sewing pattern that has been adjusted so that you knit the fabric itself and then construct it together as though you were sewing it. I hope that makes sense, but it really has got a very tailored, bespoke narration throughout the pattern. So I'm looking forward to knitting that. It's definitely going to be a long process. The gauge on that yarn is 20 stitches and 28 rows. That's what they recommend on a 3mm needle. Interestingly, because the gauge recommended for the Knitting for Olive pure silk is actually 28 stitches, and the gauge for this BC Yarn silk is 20 stitches. That's quite a big difference, isn't it? So this Knitting for Olive silk that they tell you is a 4-ply is actually a lace weight yarn. But if they said it was lace weight on the label, you'd put 75% of the knitters off ever buying it and using it for hand knitting. So they tell you it's fingering, but I don't think it is. This is probably more of a fingering, more of a 4-ply. It's still quite fine, but it's going to be a Milady's dress. I then also went to the yarn store in Cooran, which is in the hinterlands of the Sunshine Coast. It was a beautiful drive out there. You're driving around these little windy roads, and it's very bucolic, and it's very green, and it was very humid and tropical up there. It was just gorgeous. And through the trees, there are all these mountains up there because that's the terrain, and it was really, really beautiful. I'm looking forward to going up there actually, And so the little town of Cooran is a tiny little town, and the yarn shop was open, so I ducked in there just for a couple of minutes really, and I had a chat to the owner there. She was a lovely lady. The woman that was working in Say Little Hen was also a really, really lovely lady who gave me lots of advice about where to go to eat and where to go to the beach, and she gave lots of good local tourism advice in Say Little Hen in Noosaville. She was really lovely. Anyway, the woman in Studio Yarn was also really nice. She's a designer. She's got some really great samples in her shop of crochet items and knitted items that she's designed. It's like a little bit of a hippie sort of aesthetic, but in a kind of refined way. What did I get in there? I bought a big bottle of Cooran jasmine, very heavily influenced by Rebecca from the Craya Bayer, who was showing one of her samples, and it wafted, the smell wafted into her nose while she was doing her podcast, and she went, "Oh, it smells like jasmine Cooran, I just love that." Anyway, I thought, I've never smelled the jasmine Cooran, and so when I saw this, I had a little bit of a smell of it, and I bought it. It's really pretty. It's got a real floral fragrance, and I love jasmine. Is my favourite fragrance. So I bought this, and I used it to block my Alma cardigan. So that was jasmine Cooran that I got at the Studio Yarn in Cooran. And my final acquisition I pre-ordered from Skane Sisters. I bought the Liner Magazine 2025 Knitter's Diary. There you go. And this is the 2025 Knitter's Year from Liner Magazine. It's just a pocket diary. But what I was surprised when I opened it and when I went through it is that I'm surprised how many ads are in it. I don't know why I'm surprised about this, but literally it's 12 pages of ads for La Bien-Amie, Pearl Soho, other Quince & Co and other yarn companies, and then ads for themselves, and then ads for European yarn shows, and then peppered throughout the magazine, peppered throughout is right page ads. So I found that quite interesting because it wasn't a cheap purchase, and they've made money two ways: once by selling you the book, and once by selling the ads in the book to the yarn stores. But in this diary there are yarn festivals marked, which I really thought was so cute, and my first thought was, I wonder if there are international yarn festivals marked here, or whether it would just be American ones, or just the UK ones, or even just the European ones. So I looked up 2 yarn festivals in New South Wales that I know of, and one of them is the Fibre Frolic, which is on in Mulgoa. And I know from this book that the Fibre Frolic is on the 3rd and 4th of May in Mulgoa in Penrith, New South Wales, because it's in the Liner Magazine diary. So that's really cool. We're part of the, I really liked it. I know the people that run that festival, and I was really, really happy to see that, because it means that, we're all part of the same community. And in fact, on the 18th of July, you can also see that the Australian Sheep and Wool Show is on at North Bendigo from the 18th of July through to the 20th of July 2025. So that one's in there as well. This was sold as a pre-order from Skane Sisters, and I'm going to use this because I'm really not very good at documenting the specifics of my projects. I'm very bad at putting them into Ravelry. I've been a member of Ravelry since 2007, and I remember when I first joined thinking that I would never make a knitting project or a crochet project and not put it into Ravelry. I just thought that would just never happen. There was a time when I thought a day would never go by when I didn't go on to Ravelry. And now, all these years later, many years later, I realise that days do go by when you don't go into Ravelry, and you do make things that you don't put into Ravelry. But this diary, I'm going to make a pledge to myself to improve the details that I do record of my knitting projects. For posterity, I guess, because I'm not even sure why you need to do that, but I do want to. I think that that is pretty much the end of my knitting content. Have I told you everything? I finished my Alma cardigan, yes, tick. 4 whips. And the little acquisitions I made, the silk, the ukulele and the diary. And now. So next up, let me tell you what I've been reading. I do like reading. I don't read as much as I used to because I do spend some time knitting. I do tend to listen to a few audiobooks, although I personally think that listening to an audiobook sometimes kills the book for me because I'm a real skimmer, and if there's something that I'm not that interested in, I do skim past, and you can't do that with an audiobook. And I actually find that I enjoy audiobooks less than I would if I actually read the book. So my overall opinion of the book at the end, if it's been an audiobook, I don't like them as much as I do when I read them. I like to read historical fiction, and I like murder mysteries, and I like feminist fiction, and I like Australian authors. I do read other things, but they'd be my main focus, particularly historical fiction and murder mysteries. I really enjoy the writing from Hannah Kent. I really liked Burial Rites from Hannah Kent and The Good People by Hannah Kent. And I also really loved Wolf Hall and Bring Up the Bodies. They're older books now, but that's the kind of book that I really like to read. I tend to try at Man Booker Prize time, I tend to try and read some of the books that have been shortlisted for that prize. I've just finished listening to Stoneyard Devotional, and I really enjoyed that. I listened to that on audiobook. It's a story about an Australian woman who runs from her life and hides from her life in a way in a convent in the Monero district in the Snowy Mountains. It's a very quiet, small book with not too much by way of plot, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a very big impact. One of the great things in this book is that there's a mouse plague, and it's really quite it's an image that you'll never get out of your head. It's really quite brilliant the way it's written. It's a book written about women and the way that women would behave when living together in a confined community. It's also a book about forgiveness. It's a book about prejudice, and I'm surprised I liked it actually, because it also had quite a strong religious sort of theme, even though she becomes a nun and she's probably an atheist. It was interesting. I really enjoyed that. But the Man Booker Prize was actually announced yesterday, and the book that won it is called Orbital, and I'm going to read that one next. The other book that I've read recently is called The Devil and the Dark Water, and it was fantastic. It's a big book, and it put a lot of my favourites in together. There's a bit of horror, there's a murder mystery, it's a very, very big historical novel, and it's set on a ship in the 1600s in Holland. So there's a lot of Dutch references. It was a really great book as well. What have I been watching on TV? I recently watched One Night, the series on Netflix, which has got some sort of difficult subject matter. It's quite gritty, but one thing that I really liked about that is that show is actually filmed very close to where I live, and so the background and the scenery and the homes and the pub and all the coffee shops and all the places that show is actually filmed in are extremely familiar to me, and so I really enjoyed spotting all the little landmarks around in the background of that show, and it's beautifully filmed as well. The location is literally one of the characters in the show almost. The beach and the beautiful scenery up along the coast road up near Ostermere and Thurul plays a very, very pivotal role in that show. So I really enjoyed that, plus all the great Australian actresses in it. I liked it. I thought it was really quite powerful and quite good. Oh yeah, I recently started a series on Binge called Industry, which to me, I don't know if you remember back in the 90s and the early 2000s, the UK shows, there was This Life and Cold Feet and that Australian one, The Secret Life of Us, that sort of, you know, just chronicled the lives of young people in share accommodation, getting their careers together and sort of, you know, living their young early 20s life as graduates and at university and whatever, in a really gritty, realistic way. I really, really loved all of those shows, and I think that Industry is like a modern take on that. It's very graphic, it's quite explicit. You probably wouldn't want to watch it if you were too, if you didn't like sex scenes or drug use. But, well, when I say like, if you were upset by sex scenes and drug use being depicted on television, it's probably not for you. But it's about the banking industry and the employment conditions and the stresses of graduates being recruited into that real dog-eat-dog merchant banking industry and that investment banking industry. And I really enjoyed it. I actually think one of the things that they've really nailed in that show is I think they've really nailed corporate work stress and the way that when you're young and you're beginning your career in a corporate office environment, the way that you feel when you make a mistake, or the way that you are treated when you're new, and the hazing and kind of low-key bullying and low-key sexual harassment that the younger people are dealing with in this show. It's very strong. I would recommend you that, you know, as an older woman with children of my own, that's a good one to watch. I'm really enjoying it. It's got 3 seasons finished, and I'm just started the first season. So, you know, I've got a long way to go with these characters, and I'm really interested in seeing where they're going to go. So, anyway, that's about it for today. Thank you so much for joining me again. I hope you got some knitting done. I hope you're really happy and really well. I love having you come and hang out with me. I really appreciate it, every single one of you. And I will be back soon with an update on all my projects. And I've got a hankering to knit a gnome. So there might be a gnome in next episode. We'll see. I don't know. I've got 16 hours of driving ahead of me in the next couple of days, where I'm going to be both a driver and a passenger. So that's plenty of time to get some knitting done, isn't it? Okay. Well, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.